Thank you, Emily. Okay, I guess.
Thank you. I'll just tell the ground rules just very quickly before we start, please. Okay, so my name is Emily. So you can see now. My name is Emily Espinosa. Then I thank you all for joining us today. I'll be the moderator during this presentation, and I have a couple of ground rules for today. So first of all, we ask that anyone who's not presenting to keep their cameras and mics off during the presentations. This will help eliminate any background noise and distractions. Second, if you have a question or comment, please type it in the chat, and we will go through them at the end of every presentation. So we have our Q&A section. 3 presentations need to stay within 15 minutes. When time is up, I will ask the presenter to wrap up their points so we can move on to the next presentation, and this is to ensure that all our colleagues have time to share their research. I'm going to remind everyone that this session is being recorded. So we can start with the first presentation. Just let me know, Cassie, how to...
Sure, I'll just tell you when to switch slides. Is that okay? Awesome. Okay, so I'm Cassie, and thank you everyone for joining, and I'm going to be sharing on flipped classrooms and the success, how to be successful in implementing them. So you can switch slides, Emily. So what is a flipped classroom? A flipped classroom essentially is the teacher creates recorded lectures or content and shares with the students prior to coming to class. And those students watch the content on their own time outside of class. And then when they come into class, the teacher creates interactive and active learning opportunities in class time. So Strayer gives us a great definition and shares that flipped learning moves towards instructional methods or content delivery outside of the classroom and promotes active learning opportunities within the class time. And technology is vital for this model. Next. So this leads to my research question, and what are the conditions needed to successfully implement a flipped classroom? Next. Through my literature review, I drew out 5 conditions needed to be successful in implementing a flipped class. Condition number 1, opportunity to watch pre-recorded lectures and videos before class. Condition 2, fostering spaces for critical thinking and problem solving. Condition 3, adequate time and training and for preparation to facilitate a flipped classroom. Condition 4, ability and access to technology. And condition 5, creating learning environments that invite active and learning opportunities. All 5 of these conditions are vital to work together to have success in implementing a flipped classroom. Next. Condition number 1, opportunities to watch pre-recorded lectures. So first the teacher will create the video and then the student will watch the video outside of class time. These can be 15-minute video lectures, interactive, and then the content will be used for the in-class activities. Next. Condition number 2, fostering spaces for critical thinking and problem solving. This can happen both for the online learning outside of class as well as the in-class learning. The instructor then becomes the facilitator of the learning process, where hands-on activities, experiments, and embedded discussions are all part of the learning. Again, both online and in-class learning. Next. Condition number 3, adequate time for training and preparation. This model is a significant shift in educational settings, and therefore educators or teachers need time to prepare recordings for outside class and time to prepare the various active learning in-class activities they will use to deliver to help supplement the content. Next. Condition number 4, ability and access to technology. This condition was nearly evident in all of the literature I reviewed, and so therefore it's vital for students and teachers to understand any of the platforms that the teacher will be using for the flipped classroom, as well as the teacher needs to be able to construct various multimedia options to help keep students engaged and wanting to watch the content outside of class and help them to be more responsible for their learning when they come to class. Next. And finally, condition number 5, creating learning environments that invite active learning opportunities. Again, this is a vital part for the in-class learning. Active learning requires both a pedagogical shift in the teachers and students. This is going to be new to them, and so the teacher needs to explicitly teach what it will look like and what their expectations are for both online and in learning, as well as the teacher then becomes more of the facilitator in the role, guiding the students through their learning rather than lecturing. Next. So from those conditions, I created interpretations and strategies that you can use to be successful when implementing the flipped classroom. Next. So if you get trained deeper in technology and how to use it effectively, you will be more successful in implementing a flipped classroom. Because majority of the content is delivered outside of class, it's important that teachers are using the technology in the most effective ways to deliver engaging content to the students. From an international student perspective, the international populations shared that they use laptops and smartphones outside of class all the time. They felt that when they were in the flipped learning model, it helped enhance their oral performances, and they really enjoyed the technology because it allowed them to practice their learning over and over. Next. The next strategy. If you use a variety of platforms such as khanacademy.com or YouTube, you'll be more successful in implementing a flipped classroom. Teachers and educators already have a lot on their plates, and so recreating everything for this new model can be overwhelming. And so when you find content that's already created and useful, like different lectures or recordings on Khan Academy or YouTube, you can be more successful in implementing the flipped classroom. Next. If you create PowerPoint, voiceover recordings, various software, online videos, and web links, you'll be more successful in implementing the flipped classroom. Using PowerPoint or voiceover and different web links and online videos allow for those the content outside of the classroom to be more interactive, more engaging, and hopes to allow the students to be wanting to complete the outside homework more prior to coming to class. International students found that they could learn at their own pace with these recordings, and that the videos helped them to understand the content better when they were short and interactive, as well as they felt that they were more prepared for class when participating in these interactive videos. Next strategy. If you align the content in your recordings to your in-class activities, you will have more successful implementation. So I like this mirror picture because really, if you align the stuff that you're teaching outside of class and you bring it in class, there's going to be overlap and students will be able to apply. So you want to mirror what you're doing in order to be most effective. So when you plan the recordings, you plan the content that you need them to know in order when they come to class, they are able to do the experiments and apply the knowledge from the recordings that you shared with them. From an international student population, they felt that 78% understood the content better. They felt they had more of an opportunity to synthesize the information from the recordings to the in-class lectures, and it helped them simplify the new learning that was shared with them. Next. If you create peer and group opportunities to explore and expand within the learning activity in class, you'll have more successful implementation. An example of this is using Bloom's taxonomy higher level thinking. In the flipped model, it shares that the remembering stage of the model, or the remembering stage in Bloom's taxonomy, is actually at the bottom of the pyramid, and that is used for the content that's created outside of class through the videos. And then the applying and creating is at the top of the pyramid, for students to engage in interactions through peer and group discussions with the in-class. International students liked this because they found that they had the opportunity to interact more in class, and they felt like they were more involved in the communication, which led them to be more comfortable in conversations that were taking place in the class, and they felt that they were able to use the English in more authentic ways through these peer and group opportunities. Next. If you use active learning strategies for in-class learning, you'll be more successful at implementing the flipped classroom. Now, active learning can also be for the recorded lectures as well as the in-class. So the recorded lectures, the active learning could have them embedded in discussions and inquiries and giving each other feedback during the online time. And then the in-class time can be the experiments, the group work, the hands-on activities that you create for them. From international students found that this allowed for them to have more teamwork and discussion. And they felt that they developed more confidence through these active learning opportunities, as well as they enjoyed learning from their peers. And they learned to accept others' opinions and to share their own opinions during these active learning times. Next. Finally, if you guide students during in-class activities, you will have successful implementation of a flipped classroom. An example I'm going to give here is feedback and questioning. So when you are in class and the students are applying the content they learned from the recordings and you ask them questions, you give them feedback, they can look to then apply and make meaning from the content to the in-class activities. International students shared that they appreciated the feedback during the in-class time, and it allowed them to be more in control of their learning when they got that feedback. Next. So finally, flipped classrooms and international learners. So participants shared that when they took place in a flipped classroom, it helped them to be more accountable in their learning. They loved that they could do it anywhere. They also enjoyed that they were able to have a part-time job. They liked that it gave them a chance to watch the recordings over and over. And they felt that the teacher gave them more attention in a flipped classroom. And it's important to note that not just in-class activities, but also online, the teacher engaged in the discussions online more during the flipped classroom model. It helped them to minimize geographical distances, and they felt it helped them build their oral communication. So finally, I argue that education systems should utilize flipped classrooms, and the change in practice needs to start from a district level to a school level, and then finally to a teacher level. And I also argue that there is a place to use the flipped classroom model for international learners. And that's my presentation. Looking forward to your questions at the end. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Cassie. Since I'm using two screens, I might take a minute while the next presenter prepares and shares his or her screen. So I'm going to stop sharing right now. Okay. So the next presentation is by Jody Lynn Rebeck, Victor Del Corta, and Eugene Riabuca. Can you share your presentation, Jody? You have to turn your mic on.
I'm trying to share the presentation.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't see, is it entire full screen that I'm sharing?
Right now you're not sharing. So on the top, like right, left, on top, next to end the call, there is one arrow that looks up. So next to volume, there's an arrow, a square with an arrow inside.
Open share tray.
Yes.
Okay, I click it and it doesn't show anything.
Okay. Okay. So do you see the bottom, the square with this the square with the arrow.
Yeah.
So there it says screen, and then the other screens, the other windows you have. So it says share content. Below that it says screen, and next to that windows.
Enjung, do you see that on your end? Because I don't.
Let me just see. It's that share content with the arrow button.
Yes.
And then, okay. Let me see if I can try. 1 sec. How's that?
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay. Okay.
Do you mind putting it in full screen mode, Enjung?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. And
All
thanks
right.
for your patience, everyone. So Enjung and I are presenting because Victor's probably sleeping in Spain right now. But basically, we're presenting to you our collaborative online intercultural learning that we conducted at Algoma University in partnership with University GEM and Sungkyunkang University. Enjung, you probably could have said that better. Do you want to So Enjung is the Global Engagement and Mobility Coordinator and Internationalization in partnership with University GEM and Sungkyunkang University. Enjung, you probably could have said that better. Do you want to So Enjung is the Global Engagement and Mobility Coordinator and Internationalization Lead at Algoma. I'm a professor in our School of Business and Economics. And Dr. Delcourt Laura, he's a professor in marketing in Spain.
Oops. Oh.
So Enjung's just going to go over the project goals and the process we use to share this type of learning with our students.
Yeah, thanks, Jody. Hi, everyone. As Jody mentioned, my name is Eunjung Ryoka. Before I present, I guess I gonna use COIL project goals. I would like to first define what COIL is, since this term has been used loosely in Canadian higher education institutions. COIL stands for Collaborative Online International Learning, and it's more comprehensive form of virtual exchange. According to SUNY, which is State University of New York COIL Center, COIL is a new teaching and learning paradigm that promotes the development of intercultural competency across shared multicultural learning environments. Through technology, COIL fosters meaningful exchanges between university faculty and students with peers in geographically distant locations and from different lingua cultural backgrounds. COIL courses are co-equal and team taught, as Dr. Robek mentioned. Jody and Victor were the COIL faculty member for the last winter term. And so they collaborated to develop a shared syllabus that emphasizes experiential and collaborative student-centered learning. So with this term in mind, the goals and objectives of Algoma University's COIL pilot that we launched in the winter term was to encourage and promote the participation of our students and faculty in more traditional and virtual exchange program opportunities, and to test and implement approaches to better prepare our students for a transition to a traditional mobility experience once the pandemic is over. And thirdly, to enhance international learning for our students and faculty and remove barriers, providing better accessibility for those students who otherwise wouldn't be able to participate, particularly those in the underrepresented student groups, including our indigenous students, students with a disability, and students with financial needs. And lastly, this COIL work was really to build a framework that guides future developments and the implementations of a scalable future COIL program and courses at Algoma. And we are excited to announce that we are actually developing more this type of COIL courses in the fall. In terms of the implementation stage, before Algoma Youth COIL project funding was confirmed by the funding agencies, Universities Canada, we first reached out to our selected COIL consultant, and then I reached out to many strategic international partners to gauge their interest level. And once Algoma University's COIL funding was confirmed, we facilitated the Introduction COIL webinar, to which both Algoma and potential international faculty members were invited. We then requested interested parties to submit brief course proposals, and Algoma Youth COIL Committee selected those that they believed would most complement each other's courses. We then introduced these potential faculty partners to each other to determine whether they were amenable to moving forward. For the phase 2, once teaching partnerships were agreed to, a 4-week training workshop was set up that all 6 participating faculty attended. During this time, the faculty designed their COIL modules and prepared to offer their joint COIL courses. And upon completion of the training, the faculty embarked on a 5-week COIL implementation, beginning in late February and running into early April. During this time, the faculty were encouraged to complete a weekly reflection form to build a community of practice, which is the sharing, knowledge, exchange of best practices. And last phase, from late March to mid-April, both students and faculty were encouraged to respond to surveys as the project came to a close, providing evaluative data to be used for future COIL improvements. So later at this session, I will share some of these data findings that were collected from both students and faculty. So here I will introduce Jody, come back to share her COIL courses.
Yeah, so basically I just wanted to show you the 2 courses. The one that was taught at Algoma University was the course I was teaching in strategies and policies. And then the course that Dr. Del Corte was teaching was Fundamentals of Marketing in Spain. And so we looked at our syllabi and we had a lot of dialogue about like brainstorming and creating what different things we could do together so that during our weeks of courses, we can be interrupted in a really awesome way with 5 weeks of co-teaching both of our students. So I'm just going to take you through what we did and what we designed. And just to keep in mind, this was a really stressful development because we were really time crunched. And you'll see that in the end when we share some of the lessons learned. But at the same time, it's amazing that we were able to create something of meaning and value for the students. So week 1, basically, we had students introduce themselves. And I'll show you one of the tools we used was Padlet, and we had students record videos in teams. So I had teams of 3 in my course. Dr. Del Corte also had teams of 3 in his course. And so when we came together, we basically put the teams together to make 6. So we decided to ask the teams to present a recording of what their experience was like living in Canada during COVID. We were encouraging them to get outside of their homes and, you know, record some of the city life. Well, if it's life, I know COVID doesn't have a lot of life in cities, but, you know, getting them outside to just capture some of their favorite places or things to do. And Victor and I did the same. So it was really great to see Victor biking the beaches of Spain, and then my video of hiking on the ice, freezing cold in the winter. So we had those videos and we had students exchange their perspectives at the same time introducing who they were, what programs they were, and then continue the dialogue. So ask each other questions. And there was some funny dialogue about soccer, football, and other things like Spanish food and Canadian food, and just some of those biases we hold. And then in week 2, we had students meet synchronously. So everyone was live, and we had team development and icebreakers with the entire class. So we made it really fun and lively. And you can imagine during COVID, when you can't travel, how excited all of us were just to be able to engage interculturally this way. So we found it a really energizing class. And the teams then, the teams of 6, met to define their own team strategy for how they were going to deal with the case study that we assigned them. And they did some of their own team building in that synchronous class as well. And then we moved into week 3, which was asynchronous. And Victor did a presentation on the reference market, and then I did it on the VRIO, which is a strategic term, just looking at company strategy from an internal perspective. And then in week 4, students worked in groups on their own, and they had little chats on their phones or different hangouts that they'd set up to meet, but they did their work online. We didn't find any issues with engagement other than one team. There were 8 teams in total, and there was one team where some of the Spanish students weren't showing up, but eventually we got them on board. I mean, your role as faculty is part of the job, trying to re-engage them. So we found everyone was really engaged working on their own. And then in week 5, they presented their final projects to us using synchronous class, and they used Google Slides, submitted to Google Drives. We set up team drives for each of them, and that's basically how it went. So I'm just going to touch on some of the key tools we used. I did explain some of them in this, but as I mentioned, you could see the teams set up there in Google Drive. So only the 6 team members could see that drive, and that was their way of communicating with Dr. Del Corta, Laura, and myself. And then we had Padlet, which I mentioned, which was really user-friendly. Some students didn't find it user-friendly, but most of them did, where every week we basically, you could see their videos from Canada and other things like that. So the advantages of using Padlet, as you could see there, you could see some of the videos with the play buttons, the one in black there on the second row or column. But there was no registration, so students, as long as they had the link, they could come and participate. So that made that really easy. So it was really simple, like I mentioned, for us to set up. It was easy to engage media, whether it was a document or syllabi, a schedule like you see there in the first row, or just as a dialogue or discussion. Some of the disadvantages were that students weren't notified. So we'd have more videos, and then we as faculty would have to notify our classes, hey, there's more videos on Padlet, go ask questions. And so it made that a little bit cumbersome. And then some students did feel it was confusing because it is a different format from Moodle, Brightspace, what students are used to. And it was really impossible to assess student assignments using Padlet, which is why we had to go outside and do Google Drive. So it's not all encompassing, but it did the trick for our short stint there with our class. So I'll turn it over to Enjung, and she's going to, oh, is this the video we're going to play?
Yeah, do you want me to play?
Yeah, sure. At the 3:23 mark, it's when, so Victor's going to just, he shared a longer video, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to share the suggestions and challenges. Yeah, that's perfect. That we both discussed and reviewed at the end of the course that we had with the entire experience.
Not sure if this video is working.
Yeah, it looks like it's hung up. You know what, Enjung, if you go start to the beginning, maybe wait till it loads. It might just take a second.
Right. Okay.
But maybe I could talk to some of the benefits we found is that you can imagine with COVID that a lot of students were dealing with mental health issues or just struggling with the online abrupt switch. And so what we found with this project and working together, it brought a lot of life to our students. And we both received a lot of thank yous because as faculty, it's a lot of extra work to bring this type of learning into your course. But I would say that the work is well worth it, especially in response to the student feedback. You know, they were so grateful to have the opportunity to meet and work with people from different cultures. Victor and I both learned a lot as well about the content, you know, the way he approached teaching marketing strategy versus the way I approached it. And the nice thing is that there were some commonalities, but there were also some differences. So we learned a lot through that process as well.
Sorry, Jody, I don't think that video is playing.
Okay, I'll just speak to, because I think this is really, I was leaving the heart of the presentation to Victor to share. Sorry, everyone. We can share this link of his video some other way following the presentation.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll turn it over to you, Enjung, and then I'll come back at the end with the success and challenges.
Okay, sounds good. Okay. So I guess I can share a little bit about the key findings. So some of the survey results and key findings from the COIL project is, I will share a little bit about that. And we developed and conducted 2 separate surveys before the students started and after they completed their courses. So Agoma students' response rate from the pre-COIL survey was 71%, and our partner university students' response rate was 51%. We asked 4 questions in our pre-COIL survey. One of the questions we asked asked Agoma students or whether or not they had any concerns about their course being COILed. 70% of students who responded said no and said that they were very excited about this opportunity. And 30% of the students who responded were somewhat concerned about the time zone, particularly time zone differences and language barriers, and simply feeling just a bit nervous about working with students from different countries. Another question we asked was what students wanted to learn from this COIL experience. And as highlighted in this word art, the recurring theme from students was the interesting experiences, cross-cultural learning, language, people, and exposure to different cultures. In terms of the student engagement after completing the COIL courses, the response rate dropped from 71 to 35% from Agoma youth students, whereas it increased slightly from 51 to 56% from students in our partner school. We felt that changes may be due to the fact that Agoma youth students were under enormous pressure to finish their winter courses and then start preparing for their final exams during the last 2 weeks of April. So we asked 6 questions for the post-COIL survey. One of the questions we asked was whether or not the COIL courses encourage them to study abroad or engage in other virtual intercultural learning opportunities. And 60% of the students responded that they want to study abroad, and 32% responded that they would like to engage in another virtual intercultural learning opportunities. And 8% of students indicated that they want to learn more about their partner country's social structure, education system, and politics, and want to visit the country of Spain and South Korea, and would like to work abroad in the future. So another question we asked was, what were the most important skills and knowledge they feel they gained from these COIL courses? And the students responded that they developed the skills to understand different perspectives, as Jody lured from her presentation. So they really loved and learning about different perspectives from different cultures and students, and that really extended their knowledge by applying the concept that they explored in class in a global setting, and increased the connection with different people, help them in being more extrovert in some cases, and to be able to talk to other people. And the communication and connections made through COIL really made the class more exciting and enable them to break down language barriers and work with different time zones more effectively. And I think that was interesting. I thought it was interesting to learn from students' pre-COIL survey that the language barriers and the time differences were one of their concerns. But as Jody mentioned, the students' post-COIL survey didn't identify them as hindrance to work together. In terms of the faculty engagement, we developed 4 questions around whether or not their COIL experience was positive, and if so, would they be interested in teaching COIL courses again in the future? All 6 faculty members expressed that despite the number of challenges, again, as Jody mentioned, despite these challenges they faced, they felt that their COIL course was very successful in promoting and integrating and enhancing international education experiences across curricular, and they will be willing to teach another COIL in the future with the same or another international partner. So they also expressed that the language barrier was not a hindrance to their COIL project. So I'll turn my mic over to Jody, and she will share a little about successes and challenges.
All right, so as Enjung pointed out, it really helped engage students. It increased their intercultural awareness. They were really surprised to learn things and see that they did have bias in some way. So I know that was a big thing, and it's exciting when you feel like you truly changed in your perspective and learn and grow. They also increased their interest in studying abroad, and again, it increased accessibility of the underrepresented student groups, as Enjung mentioned. Also developed digital literacy skills, especially because they had to work in team. They had to prepare presentations together that they would be giving in an online environment. And so I think that happened really smoothly. It wasn't like we had to give special instructions to each of the students. They experienced social learning in helping to teach each other some unique techniques in terms of presenting in digital literacy. So that was really fascinating to see the self-directed learning that was part of it as well. So I'd say that was a big success too. Some of the challenges, as I mentioned, due to time constraints, but now that we're in this and we've learned from this, now we have a lot more time for planning, which is great. But those time constraints did pose some hindrances. For example, we started COIL in the second week of the semester that already started for me in Algoma, where in Spain they were starting a little later. And so I was keeping my students up to date on changes and that it was coming, and they were excited about it, so it wasn't all that bad. And then finding a suitable e-learning platform was really challenging. We tried to use the Spanish University was going to allow our students to enter into their Moodle platform, but then because of what content and information of our students was required, our university didn't allow it. So, you know, we had to look around and get creative in terms of how we were going to bring our students together. Couldn't bring them into Brightspace on our platforms unless they had our university email. We couldn't go into theirs because of the information that was required. So it did cause some of a challenge. But like I said, we used Padlet. Wasn't perfect, but it certainly worked. And then the effects of GDPR and other privacy regimes on planning, as well as the time differences. So a lot of times when Victor and I were meeting 10 in the morning, it was the end of his work day. So we really had to just ensure that our time was used well. And also students with the time difference, they also had to find those hours that they could work together and engage. And some of the successes, I'll just highlight some of the successes our students in particular shared about is that they love the synchronous learning. So going into next COIL course, I'm going to reduce the amount of asynchronous classes because we found those to be more disengaging. It's like we had this excitement and engagement and then it like flatlined just because it was asynchronous. There's none of that live interaction. So synchronous, more synchronous classes will be offered because the students just love them. They found them exciting. And how often do you hear students say a class is exciting? Well, I don't hear it all that often. But students learn from others' culture. They really love that. And also unique ways of evaluating content. That was another thing that they shared, that it was really cool to get, you know, a Canadian professor's feedback as well as a Spanish professor's. And then just some of the challenges. Oh, the only challenge I'll highlight here that was different, Spain has a lot more holidays. I kind of wished I lived there. They had a lot of weeks off here and there, so that interrupted the flow of our 5 weeks. And the last thing is that my students were in 4th year, just about to graduate, whereas Dr. Del Cortalora, his students were in 2nd year. So some of my students had commented that it made it just a little bit challenging because they weren't all at the same place. So I'll turn it back to you, Anjung, to share some of the takeaways.
Okay, so this will be brief. So that the key takeaways from this COIL course were that Algoma students' participation in virtual exchange increased significantly by 600%, and our indigenous students' participation by 350% in comparison to last year's traditional physical mobility programs. So, although virtual exchange programs can never replace the value gained from the real life experiences of traditional exchange and study abroad programs, we learned that through these type of COIL courses, students were able to work together in diverse teams and develop intercultural and problem-solving skills that will help them to be interculturally competent individuals in a global workforce setting. And that goes to not only just the COIL courses, but also could extend to any type of work integrated learning programs that the universities offer. So this is the conclusion of our presentation, and thank you so much for being such a great audience. And I'm not sure if we have any time for question and answers.
Thanks to both of you. The Q&A section is going to be available through the chat and after the last presentation of the day. So first we have to have the third presentation by Candy Ho from the University of the Fraser Valley in Canada. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much to my fellow presenters, and I apologize for being late because of a student meeting. So what I'd like to do is share my screen and then confirm that you can see my screen shortly.
Yes, it's perfect.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So I really enjoy hearing the previous presentation on COIL, and I'll go back to the recording on the first one, and I apologize for missing it again. So my presentation is based on my practice for the last 2 semesters when I started as the Integrative Career Capstone Learning Assistant Professor at the University of Fraser Valley. And something that COVID has really brought on is I believe that when you focus on your relationship with your students and encourage them to play to their strengths, online learning and relationships are enhanced, and it's just so much better experience for not just students, but also for me as an instructor as well. So just to set the context, I think we already know the stats, so I'm going to fly through them very quickly, is that in Canada, we have over 500,000 of international students studying at various times, and we know that there is a slight dip in 2020 because of the travel restrictions, but that's anticipating to pick up again. And I work for 2 universities right now, both of which are saying, oh, we're getting the influx of international students coming back again, so that's very encouraging. And based on my experience, and looking at the literature, international students face 2 key challenges when they set foot on our campus, and at this point, our virtual campus. So the first one is, this phase, right? This frustration of I'm feeling so overwhelmed. I don't even know where to begin, which speaks to their adaptation to post-secondary educational expectations. Some of the literature, and I'm happy to include a list if you follow up with me, is that sometimes as an instructor or even institutions, our implicit expectations that we thought everybody knows, that we thought is common sense, are not often so common, and we need to make them more explicit. Christina Page, one of my colleagues at Kwantlen Polytechnic University, talked about international students coming from the scripts from their home country that has worked for them. They were successful in education there, and now applying it to their new context. In our case, it'd be Canada, and they're not so successful. And you can imagine they're frustrated, thinking, well, it worked where I was. How come it doesn't work here anymore, right? And then that leads to the third point, which is, well, if I don't know what I don't know, how can I ensure that I'm successful? Because I don't even know if I'm asking the right questions and doing the right things. And oftentimes, in the eyes of instructors and other domestic students, they could be misunderstood, especially if they have trouble expressing themselves in English, questioning their language ability, but it doesn't equate to their level of competence. So it's really interesting when you dig deep on all of these dissonance that's happening. And then the second challenge is forging meaningful connections. This picture kind of show, what we want to achieve is even over the screen that students can make friends and to connect with one another. But sadly, this is an old report. I believe that there's a new one that's coming up. Over half of international students in a survey launched in 2014, published in 2015, said that they have no Canadian friends, right? And really here is a missed opportunity to enhance cultural awareness, sense of belonging. I've been living and breathing in the higher ed student affairs literature, and it affects student retention as well. And we see many students graduating from, their diplomas and certificates because they're thinking, well, one, there's, obtaining PR potentially, but on the other end, they could have, if they had a higher quality experience, friends that they can rely on, and much more affiliation with their institution, they might they have stayed and complete full degree. So that's something to think about as well. And so building on these two challenges, this is a practice-based presentation. So I'm happy to share with you that at the University of Fraser Valley, I teach what's called the Arts 299 course. So leveraging my expertise in career and student transition. So just brief discussion, description here, where the course introduces the integration of critical reflective assessments. We do a lot of reflection throughout the 13 weeks, and in the condensed course, 7 weeks. And my expertise is in career development. So we get students to look at, the meaning of work, and it could be very diverse, could be grounded in their home country. And we also show them a little bit of, what the Canadian context could look like. We also get them to dive deep in their personal reflection. So what are your, personal values bringing into the workplace? And what are some professional values that you feel would be critical for you to align with future organizations that you work in? And ultimately, the students walk away with an individualized personal development, career development plan in moving to their next step forward. So it's 9 university level credits or above. So basically, after your first 2 semesters, you're likely going to be able to take the course. So as a result, this course is highly popular with international students, especially those that are graduating with a diploma. They tend to take this course in their last year. I would be remiss if I don't mention there's a sequel of the course, 399, in which it's targeted towards students with their full degree. So if you want to learn more about that, I'm also happy to share. So with that in mind, what I would like to share is three ways to achieve meaningful online student learning. And the practice from this course was actually featured in University Affairs. So if you give me 2 seconds, I'm going to include that in the chat. I wrote a very brief blog article detailing, exactly what I did and what I've learned. So if you want to learn more, it is going to be in the chat box in 2 seconds. So the first thing I did was launching office hour parties. So turning it into something that's more festive than, one-on-one conversation. So every single week, a new module is launched. And I try to use this opportunity, the first 10 to 15 minutes to walk students through the new activities, the new assignments in this module, things I want you to pay attention to. And whenever possible, I also tell them from the course designer perspective, this is how I went about designing these components, and this is why they're all important to your career development. So give them more than they need so that they can understand the context. I find that many times with asynchronous courses, when it's on paper, they read it, but they don't really think about it. So if the instructor is there to walk them through, it's a lot more engaging. And I have found that with international students, they come to learn more about my expectations, and they're more likely to ask questions as well, because they're optional, they're recorded. So the smaller groups actually facilitate those in-person conversations, and people can come chat with me after one-on-one. And then so the next kind of the intervention that I have is at the end of the week, there is a module, at end of module survey, 3 questions that I asked them to give me feedback on. What was most useful? What was the least useful, and tell me why on both occasions. And because this is a career development course, tell me questions that you have about career development that the content has not covered for you yet. And so every single week I created videos to walk people through, oh, you know, these are some themes that came up when people said this was useful, this was not useful, and here's what I'm going to do with the information. Or sometimes students just need, you know, I'm confused about this particular point. Do you think you can give more resources? So as an instructor, I believe in my responsibility in being responsive and right away, right? So instead of me getting that course semester end evaluation every single week, I feel like I'm getting really good feedback from students, and I'm also showing them that they're important stakeholders in this course community, that they're helping me improve the course for their fellow students, as well as for future students in taking this course as well. And then finally, this approach saved me so much time. There's a lot of assignments in the course, and as a result, there is a lot of marking. So in addition to creating really detailed rubric, what I've started doing is once I finish maybe marking about half the submissions, 75% of the submissions, I reflect on, okay, what are like my most popular comments that I keep copy and pasting to like every other student, and I elevate those in another debrief video where before I give students their individual marks back for the assignments, I record a video and I said, these are the most popular comments that keeps coming up. I want you to pay attention to that beyond the assignments. And so that before students receive their individual feedback, they would watch that video, or maybe it's a blog, sometimes it's a podcast, and they would go and review, oh, you know what, she said this applied to everybody. Oh, of course, I didn't include that, or I did a really great job doing that. And so when I release the marks, it doesn't come off as a surprise to them that they're getting this general feedback. And I encourage them, a lot of them take them up on my offer to come to office hours again to debrief individually. So there's 2 levels of feedback. And so some of the students' comments were really encouraging. I'll start by saying the challenge is, holy cow, it takes a lot of time. But I felt like once I got into the rhythm of recording videos and seeing that it's valuable to students and they actually watch it, which is to my biggest surprise, because who has time for that, right? Is that, students are reflecting back that in an online environment, they felt my presence, they felt that I care. And the last one kind of break my heart a little bit. Like, it's been hard this semester, not been able to interact or to give feedback. And so, having a professor that does that really matters. And one more that's really funny from a really honest student, where they said, to be honest, I didn't think she would keep up with the launch parties. I thought that other instructors in the middle of semester would just, drop the launch parties. But it's that consistency that I realized students are really craving, especially international students, because they show up every single week, that they care about their success in the course. And so I really like this, that, the student was reflecting back that instructors also embrace a lifelong attitude, which I think, to be a good instructor, you also need to be a learner on the side as well. And then one more intervention that's content related that I'll show you as I wrap up is the 4 Ps. So as part of the course, I also weaved in Indigenous ways of knowing into the course. So the 4 components are plan, passion, position, and pivot as well. So each week in the last month, I got students to reflect on one of those components, and they are mapped onto the medicine wheel. So in terms of career planning, plan happenstance. So taking advantage of unplanned, unexpected events, what are they going to do? So that's the physical aspect. And then with passion, in terms of what they're thinking in their mental capacity, right? So in thinking about, how important is it for you to have passion in your career development? And then in considering their position and connecting everything together, so tapping on that spiritual component is thinking about their beliefs of work-life balance as opposed to work-life integration, especially when we're going into moving out of the pandemic. What is that going to look like when our work and home roles are much more overlapping with one another? And then finally, the pivot. So thinking about their transition ahead, how are they feeling about it? And certainly there's sometimes mixed feelings. And so full circle moment is after that, I get them to reflect on, okay, so take a look at all of the reflections that you've had over the course of the 4 weeks. What are some common themes that have surfaced for you when we explored each of the components? And how does that connect back to your values or transferable skills? And then at the end of the course, I also get them to offer their own interpretation of my model and how I match them against the medicine wheel, which is an Anishinaabe tradition. And I also acknowledge that I'm a settler, first generation immigrant, that I don't I'm only one perspective that I'm offering. So I got them to also share with me what they have as well. So a couple of students' feedback. First one, a really thoughtful email from an Indigenous student saying that they liked the fact that I gave them space to offer their own interpretation, and the discussion was just so much more enriched as a result of giving students that space to do that. And then one more comment about from an international student, because usually, so going back to one of the key challenges was, international students connecting with instructors, connecting with domestic students. So this student have expressed, sense of pride that they were able to share their story as an international student through walking the 4 Ps using the medicine wheel. And so just very quickly, I have a lot more comments about that, but I'll save it for the extended abstract. But in reflecting on that, future direction that I'd like to take is to definitely make more space for students to tell their story within the course content, just like I did with the 4 Ps, and also outside the courses. And I've been thinking about ways to enhance that even during office hours. The questions that I ask make a lot of difference. The use of silence, as we know, has worked really well for particular cultures as well. So I'm going to leverage that a lot more. And then ultimately, this speaks to meeting students where they're at as well. So I'm going to be really thinking deeply about adding to the pre-survey that I've already been doing, and where are they coming from, and what do they want to get out of this course, and building out that survey, but also having them share their insights from that survey with their peers right off the bat in the beginning in their introductions. And then what I really liked about the last presentation that we've heard is, oh my gosh, you all did such a great job gathering evidence. I did this solely based on my practice space, and I really didn't think about how am I going to survey. So this coming year, my first year as a faculty, I'm just happy to have survived. My second year, I'm going to build in a lot more evidence in addition to the weekly surveys, to my teaching evaluations, but also maybe a semester end survey where students tell me, where do you think your areas of growth? How do you think you've built confidence throughout? And that's it. I am happy to stay in touch. I'm including my contact information there. Please don't hesitate to contact anytime. And I hope that you all have enjoyed the conference. And I think I'm the last presentation. So if you've got any questions, I think you can type in the chat box now. Back to you, Emily.
Thank you, Candy. So yes, right now we have our Q&A section. We only have 10 minutes though, so maybe each group can pick one question, or maybe we can ask the group or the presentators just one question so we can finish this meeting on time. So yeah, feel free to use the chat.
Jody Lynn, I just wanted to respond to your comment. Yes, do personal weekly videos. I to be honest, I was skeptical and I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm spending all this time recording videos. Is there anybody who's going to watch it? I was so pleased to see that in the end of my course evaluation. And then I in hindsight, I could have kept statistics, and I'm going to do that now to see just what the viewing is. And it's so interesting to see multiple views, which was good to see.
Yeah, and I mean, with COVID and everything, you're never certain how many people are watching. I know on Brightspace we have statistics on that, but I just thought I was getting mixed messages from different colleagues. Some of them were saying, well, with asynchronous, you shouldn't record a video. And I'm thinking, how are you supposed to guide students through your learning and what they're being assessed on? So I thought, I'm going to ask them so that I have proof to show my colleague. And I could not believe it was 95% though. I thought maybe like 80, 75. Yeah. But when 95%, I thought, oh, that just, so I shared it with my colleague and he was shocked. So yeah.
Excellent.
I think that links to kind of my research. I know my research was a little bit different than your guys's, but in the flipped learning, the literature that I found shared that the international students appreciated the videos because they could pause, they could get the time to assess what was shared and not just reading and trying to make sense of that, but they could actually hear and listen and then go back. So I don't know, I think it's kind of interesting that it all links through all three of our presentations, even though it was all significantly different presentations.
Cassie, I'm so sorry I missed out on your presentation.
Oh, that's okay.
Would you mind sending me that reference?
Sure.
That sounds like something I'd love to read and, and more and share with my colleagues.
Can you put your email in the chat again so that I didn't write it down?
Thank you. And then a comment here from Francis. I find the asynchronous teaching more challenging. I recorded many videos too, but I don't have statistics on the viewership. So Francis, you and I are going to hold each other accountable by flipping on that statistics and tracking switch.
I just wanted to ask, hi everybody. I wanted to ask what, I'm so tired. What format or how do you use your the video tool in your learning management system, or do you use what do you use to record the videos or to prepare your materials? Because honestly, it never occurred to me to record viewership of my videos, but we use Zoom, and I was able to. When I recorded my lessons, I was able to get statistics about who was there in my synchronous classes that were on Zoom. And of course, I can monitor engagement when people are sitting in front of me, but it's the asynchronous classes I'm having difficulty getting, trying to figure out how I can monitor their, how I want to determine how engaged they are. That's what I wanted.
Well, I think that's a great question. It'll be fascinating to see what we all use. And I use a variety of tools. I did try Bongo within Brightspace, and I didn't find it as versatile or user-friendly as Zoom. I found Zoom, if you record, there's two ways of recording on Zoom, and if you record it in the cloud, it will actually document all the words you say. Now, it's not perfect, but at least you've got that closed captioning there. And I also use iMovie. Now, iMovie is really fun because they have trailers. So I actually created this it's such a nerdy video, but it was a trailer of like, welcome to the class. And it's all done for you. You just have to add the words and, put in some things. But those are the two that I personally liked. I think it really matters what you're comfortable with. I just found opening Zoom, clicking record was the best.
Yeah.
How about you, Candy and Cassie?
Francis, I use a variety. So in at UFV we use Blackboard, and so along with Blackboard it has Kaltura. So I use that, and frankly, the reporting back with student comments. What I did was I build a PowerPoint, literally black, white background, black fonts on copy and pasting each student's question, and I just hit. I use a Mac, so I use QuickTime to record a screenshot of the video, and I just talk for 5 minutes addressing their questions. But at the very least, it has the visual of the questions, which international students really like, and then just me blabbing on for a good 5 minutes addressing each question. So as as low tech as possible is still fine. And sometimes the students have told me, oh, I don't watch the presentation. I just listen to you speak when I'm out for a walk or something.
I can't speak to any of that because I teach grade 2-3. So I am not, I am currently just finishing like my master's, and this is kind of like my final presentation, but I do use a lot of different platforms because we have to go online. So Google Meets, it does the same thing as Zoom. It saves it once you push record, it saves it right into your Google Drive, and you can get a transcript of the words as well, and it does that for you. I also have simply just recorded myself on my phone and then created it as a YouTube link and then made it unlisted so that everyone can view it. Those are a couple of things for me, but I don't teach post-secondary students, so it's a little different, I guess, for me. And thanks, Jody, for answering my question. I was just curious if you guys, because you had said you use Google Drive, and then I thought maybe if you use Google Classroom as well. So
we're a Google school, and my husband actually he's works for the Ministry of Education in e-learning, and so both of us brainstormed. Like, we were looking at Google Classroom, looking at Padlet. There are a few other platforms, and just thought the layout of Padlet was just a bit more user-friendly than Google. Like, it was, you open it, everything was right there at once, whereas Google Classroom, sometimes you have to scroll. So that was the only difference.
Yeah. If you make topics in Google Classroom, so like I looked at your Padlet, and if you make topics, and then they could have different topics, and you just click on the topic, and then it goes to that as well.
Oh, really?
Cool.
Yeah.
I'll have to ask about that magic of topics, because I think I did see once where, not in Google Classroom, but does it actually have boxes around each topic and you just click on it, or is it just the words?
On the left-hand side, it's just the words. And so say I'm teaching small crawling and flying animals right now to my 2-3. So it's literally called small crawling and flying animals. Or if I'm teaching shapes, I make it shapes or measurement or whatever I'm working on with them. And then they find it easier because then they don't have to scroll through a year's worth of activities. They just go to the topic, and then it's right at the top, the last thing that's posted.
You're a blessing. I have a son in grade 3. And honestly, she has some beautiful, I don't know if you've seen this done, where it's a picture and you click on different aspects of the picture and it takes you to that site, like math.
Was that for hearing and sound? I have one for hearing and sound.
She has it for math or the library.
Really?
Like, she has a library, you go in, it's one big picture, and you could click on the book you want to read, and it takes you to either a video or a self-reading of the book.
Yes. Call those the virtual libraries.
Is that all Padlet?
No, that's in, I don't know what that is, actually.
I think it's just links in Google Classroom from a Google slide.
Google Classroom.
Exactly, from a Google slide. That's right. They use the picture and they embed links into the pictures. So when you come in, it looks like you actually enter a picture of a room, but then they embed the links behind the pictures. I haven't got that advanced, but I was really impressed at my son's. I have 2 sons, so one of them has that, and I was like, wow. And the other one has where the heck is the assignment? Scrolling through for 4 days. Yeah.
This is so interesting, because I teach in the Faculty of Education, and I teach first-year students straight out of high school a number of years before they're going to be in the professional program. But I always try to model technology. I try to introduce one type of technology every year. So last year it was Mentimeter.
Nice.
But and they really responded well. And I tried Jamboard, but I one of my goals this month was to figure out how to better use Jamboard, and I think I've got that, because this is my 5th day of workshops. Aside from this,
I love Jamboard. I use it all the time. I
It-
use it now that we're back in class. I teach the
Really?
kids with Jamboard. Yeah, they love it.
Yeah, I realized I think I hadn't seen enough. I didn't have enough training when I started using it. But I think as an instructor and not a booklet, I'm writing that down, Jody. I do find it overwhelming. There's so many tools, and I try some tools, but then
You know
I'm
what, Francis? I can
stuck.
relate to that because, there's so many, things, bright, shiny tools. I
Yes.
find that I use it for the first round. I get discouraged. I'm like, the dissonance of like, oh, this doesn't apply to that. And then like, semesters later, I would go and a faculty member would be presenting on their success on the tool. That's when I give it, a second thought. And maybe my curriculum or course activities have changed. So it's like, moving target and moving pieces. So I
just thought of one more platform. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but for videoing, because you guys were talking about videoing and how you can enhance it. Flipgrid. Because Flipgrid, you video, the kids can video back. You can give them general feedback so the whole class can see, or you can give them specific feedback based on their video. And it's called Flipgrid, and I use it for everything too. Lots of my kids love it. So
I've heard of that. I think one of the things our Teaching Commons gave us last year that I found really helpful, and I'm going to use it again this year, was a chart where I could think about what my learning outcomes were, what the content was, and then what technology might work best. And I like that planning tool because it kept my learning goals at the center. So I wasn't just throwing in I was looking and thinking which of all of these tools I have would best fit this learning situation.
Exactly.
And I think if I take that approach, then I'm more likely to be successful.
Yeah.
And my students are more likely to learn what I hope they will learn.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so exciting to connect with caring, like, teachers, because I think, regardless of the tools we use, if you're caring and you try and organize the class in a way that makes sense and you're responsive to what you said, Candy, to learning, like, I'm learning every day. So the class I taught yesterday isn't as good as the class I'm going to teach, the next day. So I think really amazing.
I'm sure we can swap stories from the trenches where things didn't work out. And then you talk to, we're all learning about digital literacy.
Yes. Yeah.
But I think, I don't know if it's in which session, but we're talking about being a vulnerable educator. And that was one of the most transformational things that happened to me. And it was just this past term, at the beginning of the term, I really want them to learn about being a reflective educator. Mm-hmm. And so I told a story of a mistake I made, or an incident with a student almost 20 years ago that still haunts me. Mm-hmm. And so many of them wrote to me and said, I have never heard a teacher say they made a mistake. But it's fascinating. And these are all people who want to be teachers. So it was so interesting that moving forward at the end of the course, when they said, what's your biggest takeaway from this course? And they said, being a reflective educator. I realized, and I keep telling them, you're not going to be perfect, because that's not what it's about. But it's that you strive to do your best, and that you model striving.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really interesting. I've never, it just never occurred to me. I have all these memories of these terrible, these times where I completely messed up. But sharing, mm-hmm. I think I'm at the point, because I'm pretty close to retirement. I think I don't really care. Give me a bad review. I don't really care. I really do care, but it's okay. And you need to, and the other thing is, I feel that they go in thinking, most of them think I'm going to change the world, and I'm doing this because I love children. And I know that's not enough. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That they need to, they will develop but they need to know right off the bat that being a reflective educator is and as Jody Lynn, as you say, critical reflection is so important.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you're bad. It's just you're learning. It's the Carol talk, right? The growth mindset.
Yeah.
It's all learning. It's all growing. And
Mhm.
yeah, so you shouldn't define yourself by the failures. That should propel you to be a better person.
Yeah.
And teacher.
Yeah, we talk. I'm not great yet.
Yet, I love it.
Maybe next year.
It's my favorite word yet.
Yes.
Ah,
Yes.
Jump in. It seems like a very interesting conversation, but I just want you guys to know the session is actually over now. So
Oh gosh.
you guys can share contact information. You guys can connect elsewhere, but amazing conversations, and I'm so happy to have you guys here with us today. Thank you for joining us. You do have a bit of a break until 4, and then we're going to come back for the panel and the debriefing at the end.
okay. Thanks so much for having me. Beautiful meeting all of you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you at the next session.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.